Theo-Humanism, Blog 4, Friendship, a Parallel Diplomacy.
When it comes to diplomacy, some speak of the friendship of nations, but such language only masks the fact that diplomacy is really about states negotiating power interests on the global stage. In the last blog, Blog 3, I discussed friendship and ended with the question, what would the world look like without it? Okay, friendship is a nice idea, but so what? This blog documents a real case, a group of young Americans who got it into their heads to pursue a parallel diplomacy. What would diplomacy look like, they proposed, if friendship were the purpose and not just a nice word to describe power relations between states? Friendship is not about getting the upper hand over others. It's about wanting to be with others beyond one's interests. Could that be a way of doing diplomacy? These young Americans, whom you'll meet in a moment, undertook a multi-year venture called CLLC, Companionship Through Language, Language Through Companionship, in partnership with high schools and youth centers in Morocco. As you listen to them share the experience, I invite you to make the connections. Keep in mind the following points. First, how did the CLLC group make global friendship work? Second, how did they do diplomacy? Was it by exchanging interests? Third, what's the takeaway? Some pursue diplomacy with disastrous results. Why does diplomacy fail? What insights does the CLLC venture offer for effective global diplomacy today? Let's now meet the CLLC group.
I teach high school English in Chicagoland.
My name is Phoebe Hall.
My name is Abigail Bellcrest.
Currently a jack of all trades at a startup trying to shift over to software development.
Tell us a bit about what you were doing so far from the homeland.
So we did a variety of different activities to expose Moroccan students to English conversational opportunities in a friendship-oriented environment.
Sessions and dialogues that we had both with students in the workshop series that we facilitated throughout the country, and also in some of the more intimate conversations with scholars and more university level students.
Sort of core purpose of those activities, however varied, was to be present.
The word that comes to mind is relationships, and building relationships, and more importantly, building that relational trust.
A lot of the times we served as representatives for the US, like what does America think about this? And so you have to kind of condense many different parts of it, both about what do Americans think about themselves, and also kind of how do Americans see Morocco.
How would you describe your encounters in a culture that was not your own?
Spaces that we were in were incredibly varied. One of the things was just this sense of enthusiasm about having that space together to share in conversation, to build community together, to show off talents.
Having that backbone of structured activities was really important. And I think the CLLC structure, where there's a little bit of English language learning, but also these broader subjective questions, is kind of perfect. If you just straight up ask someone, like, what is a good person? Like, what does it mean to be a good citizen? How do you even approach it? But when you have to solve that first step of, how do I even explain like what a citizen is? Like, how do I broach that language barrier? You're going through a series of small games that eventually pay off as this much larger one. But because you've had to do the basic communications, I think it comes a lot easier.
Very intimate spaces, which even as a student who had studied abroad, I think that there are certain somewhat superficial interactions. You can go to a family, you can have a meal, that's one thing, but being able to enter into actual like planning spaces and Sufi gatherings where we were talking about spirituality in a really meaningful and honest way.
It was really refreshing to see young people being really enthusiastic about going to school on the weekend and doing the heavy lifting of having a conversation in a language that they were learning. So that was really beautiful.
We all cared about the young people that we were working with and the communities that we were working with.
That kind of real trust and friendship is built through a combination of all of these different kinds of interactions. We couldn't just be sitting around a round table discussing politics and to have it be a sustainable relationship or encounter. And I think that we could joke around and laugh all night, but it wouldn't hold the same gravity.
It was electrifying. The community could tell it, that reciprocal, right, sense of being welcomed and then serving the community. Very gratifying.
So tell us a bit about the results.
Because CLLC happens outside of the context of like a formal school day, there's no test, you're not evaluated. It's about doing the process and participating in conversation and trying new things.
When we were in Central Morocco, we had the students create small skits, basically using as many emotion words as they could. And then we had them act it out on the stage, and their imaginations and the places that they would take these storylines. And Dave and I were just encouraging them to kind of go bigger and farther. And it was very much like a bilingual improv group with a focus on emotions.
What we're doing there, honestly, it seems like we're introducing just some novelty in like many different ways. Like the thing that I'm thinking of is when we were teaching in one of the more rural schools, a lot of the students were excited to come back to the classroom. For them being able to like produce something in a group that they could then show to other people was exciting because it was new.
I'm going to take us to Casablanca. We guided students through a writing assignment, an essay in English, and then having something to show for it because they present it. Like, what an incredible feeling of empowerment to present their piece to their community, to their peers.
Were there any challenges being there as Americans?
Our Americanness and our positionality as Americans was never removed or I think forgotten at the door, but I think we came to a place where it was no longer inhibiting, it was no longer a boundary to a real relationship.
I remember one student asking, like, is this certificate from the CLLC something I can use to get a visa? And it definitely makes you very aware of how much more power you have in this interaction.
I think it prompted some really interesting reflection about power and identity and what that looks like in these like one-on-one or small group settings.
But also raising those conversations within the Moroccan community. We had students from public and private schools sitting at the same table talking about inequities in the educational system.
Connection is so core to the idea of CLLC, but we're not like soul to soul companions the entire time. There are times where you've kind of lost the group and need to redirect. That's part of the process too, and that's part of that dimension of relationship building. And it's easy to get excited about the idea of connection, but that disconnect or that awkwardness or those challenges are part of making that happen.
Those exchanges and interactions, I think, were the process. Being able to time and time again come to these different tables just open and ready and willing to interact, I think was really the goal of CLLC.
Okay, dear friends, you've heard the CLLC story. Let's now get to the takeaway. Keep in mind the following insights. First, friendship begets true equality.
When it came down to the interactions with the people, seeing one another as equals, being able to sustain those conversations and always maintaining that sense of equality, that we are speaking as equals.
Second, friendship begets true recognition.
Special opportunities of mirroring with many of the students and just peers and friends who I was interacting with through our programs, where there was just this moment of kind of shared recognition.
Third, friendship dispels the power calculation.
Morocco is now just like a permanent part of my brain. And I assume maybe the reverse is happening. The United States, everyone is aware of it as a political entity, but I guess I'm hoping that interacting with us as kind of more average people, just like high school teachers, they will have a better sense of America not as a monolith.
Fourth, friendship begets knowledge of greater realities and new possibilities.
Participating in anything with this group is like the opportunity to be seen complexly and see other people complexly and have a really dedicated space to do that.
And that, dear friends, is the CLLC venture. Bottom line, if you want to be a better diplomat on the global stage, pursue the science of friendship. Until the next Theo-Humanism posting, adios.